So Simone Weil, I've been reading her book, The Need for Roots again. She does quite a large chapter on uprootedness, right? And much like rootedness is this idea of like shared values and shared customs, shared traditions and shared expectations of what a society should look like, that a community should hold, mutually. That it effectively kind of binds us together, keeps us singing off the same hymn sheet, so to speak. Uprootedness is basically when these ties are severed. There's loads of different examples of uprootedness that she gives, but I think the most like obvious or stark example would be the idea of colonialism. At the time for her, it was the Nazi Party trying to spread their agenda across Europe into different countries and the like. Don't know if you've turned on the news recently, but it's, stuff like that's still happening a lot in various different fashions, and it's really, really dangerous. You've got these values and customs and traditions that have been developed over hundreds of thousands of years that can be effectively deleted from history. And secondly, countries don't tend to adapt well to agendas that have been imposed upon them. And the end result of, this lack of place, lack of culture, lack of tradition, is that those people are then far more likely to uproot others in the future, because they're more susceptible to, propaganda or ideology or, false leaders and the like. But there's more subtle examples as well of uprootedness. For example, she talks a lot about the Industrial Revolution that was going on at the time. So you'd have a guy that would have been a farmer, in which he was connected to the land, his produce, the community that he would feed. He would have jurisdiction and responsibility over his work. And the same guy would then go on to work in a factory, for example, 20 years later, and he'd be pushing buttons and pulling levers, and he's disconnected from the end result of his work. He doesn't have responsibility. He doesn't have jurisdiction. He just goes in and he does for 12 hours a day, right? This happens all the time in the modern world too. You hear people talking about how they sell their soul to the corporate world, for example. And why do we do that, right? Why do people do that? Money is often the reason, which she argues is another cause of uprootedness. She gives the example of housing, for example. People are buying to invest. People are buying to turn over a profit, as opposed to buying for a home in a community. She talks about salary, right? People are doing their work in pursuit of money, not in pursuit of purpose or doing good work. I think another good example is the likes of social media. The very words people put out